Welcome to video 17 in a series of introductory videos for SolidCAM. This video's topic is on the turning toolpath, both for OD and ID, as well as the grooving toolpath. So let's begin. So you can always go to SolidCAM turning to access the turning toolpath. I'm actually going to do it my old way with the add turning operation. And we're going to click on the turning toolpath. Now, you see in the list there was only turning, as in we're just going to be turning whatever geometry we choose in this window. So that could be the OD or the ID. Pretty much anything, any geometry you have on this part that is either OD or ID can be done using the turning toolpath. Again, the window is the same. We start with the geometry, the tool, the levels. So let's just go right into that with the new geometry. In this case, I'm going to do the OD. I'm just going to do the outer profile there. And you saw from video 16 when I did the facing, we removed the front face of the material. We just faced it to that point there. So this green line actually represents the updated stock. And you'll see that as we go forward. Every time you add a toolpath, you are machining off the part, you have an updated stock, and then your toolpaths down the line will know what material is left over. So let's begin by choosing this chamfer right here. Again, we're just choosing the target profile for the geometry for these toolpaths. Your parts may have many fillets, chamfers, a lot of straight edges. You either could go through and choose each individual one, or you can use the new features on the side here, up to entity. And when I click on that, it's waiting for me to choose the next entity in this chain that I'd like to connect to the first one. So in this case, what I'm going to do is choose the last entity in this toolpath. Right here, basically, this is where I'm going to take this toolpath right to the chamfer. So if I click on that, it finds the connection between that last entity that I selected and then the one that I just selected. So basically, it completes the chain for me. So click the green check mark. It's orange now, so that is what we're going to machine out of the green contour. If I go to modify geometry, I can extend this geometry past certain areas. I can go to trim, extend, and add material, or in this case, I can just do an auto extend. So in this case, what I'm doing here is there's about 10 thou left on the OD there. I just added a little bit of an extension, so we just machine that right off that contour. So green check mark. Let's go to Tool, Select. Just choose a tool from my library. If you don't know how to create turning tools, I'll reference you to video 2, once again, where I created both milling and turning tools. So just accept that. In turning and mill turn, the turning tools, we should make sure to confirm the mounting. So in this case, this is my little window here. Currently, the tool is coming in the positive Z direction. I want it to come in the positive X direction. I want the tool to be mounted this way. So I just choose that little icon there. In turning, the levels are essentially just the safety distance. So if you look in the bottom left corner, all this number represents is the safety distance of the tool away from the updated stock, basically the last cut. Okay. Under technology section is always the particulars of this toolpath. In this case, we're doing turning, and we have multiple options here. So I said at the beginning of the video, the turning toolpath actually lets you do the OD and the ID. So you can either choose those modules there, or you can either do the face front or the face back, meaning that if the tool was still oriented in that positive Z direction, I could use a grooving tool or a diamond insert or something like that that is oriented correctly so that I can do countersinks, chamfers, dish geometry at the front of the part. So that allows you to actually change the direction of the toolpath as well. If you find that the turning shouldn't go in the axial direction but go in the radial direction, then you can just click on face front and use the same geometry to actually just face in the radial direction. I've chosen as my work type rough, which means that it leaves the roughing tab open. So if we go to the roughing tab, you can see the options we have under rough type. They're very self-explanatory. As soon as I click on, let's say, going from smooth, you see in the bottom left corner, smooth is just basically follows the exact contour. If I change it to stairs, you'll see that it actually will step along that equal step that I've defined down here. So I'm just going to leave it as smooth. Here's the steps of our roughing path. I'm taking equal steps. I also have adaptive step down engaged as well, meaning that if there's any feature on this part that falls in between those 40 thou steps, an additional turning pass will be put there just to get to that step. Okay. As it takes those steps, it's actually going to leave this material on the X and the Z. So those are my offsets. And if we had a tool that could do zigzagging, well, then here's the zigzag direction, okay? As well as, instead of just doing an axial cut, if I wanted to change the angle of the cut, there's my rough angle. Under the finishing tab, we actually have semi-finish and finish. So if I wanted to engage any of those functions, they're here. And they have similar parameters. So I'm just going to open up the finish. So with the same tool, I'm going to rough out this OD and actually do a finishing pass as well. So as soon as I click on the type of finishing I'd like to do, I'm going to finish on the rest material only. In this case, because I've left material behind, it's still going to do the entire contour, but we have that option there as well, entire geometry. And I'm not going to do any extensions on the rest material, but if I wanted to, say I only had a small fillet that I needed to do a semi-finishing on, I can do an extension so that it actually starts outside of that area. We also have compensation as well for the turning, so you can engage that there. Under strategies, especially with this part here, you see how I have that groove there. My tool does not have a proper angle to go into that groove. So I could tell it to non-descend, meaning that it'll skip right over there. It'll actually just continue whatever path it's on and skim right over the groove. Under break edges, all the internal corners, external corners along my chain, I could add fillets, chamfers. I could do anything really I want to modify that chain if those things weren't already there. If it was a sharp corner and I wanted to make sure it had a chamfer on it, I could just click on external corner, chamfer. But in this case, I'm just going to go with the original design intent and make it a sharp corner. And under link, it's, again, all the turning tool paths. You have the ability to change the approach point and the retract point. In this case, by default, it's the right safety corner, and you have your lead in, lead outs as well. So let's just do a save and calculate on that external tool path. And you can see that it did my 40,000 step downs. It did not descend into the groove, and there was a little bit of a adaptive step down as well, because one of these levels did not fall between those 40,000 steps. So let's take a look at that in simulation. So as you saw from some of the milling videos and the previous videos in this series, we have the host CAD and the Solid Verify. And if we just go to Solid Verify, let's take a look at that. So there's a representation of the jaws that I created in video 15. And if we press play on that, we'll see that I turned down the part. And we can take a look at that as we always do. But in turning, we actually have an additional simulation, the turning simulation, which shows us, again, representation of the jaws, representation of the cross-section of the part, and a cross-section of the stock. And we can simulate that here as well. Okay. So I mentioned that the turning toolpath is useful for OD as well as ID. So let's add an ID toolpath. So again, I'm just going to right-click, add turning operation, turning. The window is exactly the same. We're actually going to program this almost exactly the same. It's just we're going to choose internal geometry. We're going to just bore this out. But I'll take a moment here to show you that the green sketch there represents the updated stock. So we've actually turned the outside and faced it. So now it knows that all that material is removed, and we only have the internal bore. Okay. I've actually added a drilling cycle to this, a turning drilling cycle, and I'll review that when I get to video 19. So the chain for this is really just going to be this line here. Green check mark. I could go to modify geometry, but that chain pretty much runs the length of the stock. But what I'll do here is I'll show you how to use the trimming. So if my tool actually can't reach the full length of that internal bore, I actually have the ability to put in a negative number in here, and I can trim it back. So you can see the yellow representation of our chain. It uses that line there as the geometry, but I've modified the geometry so that it actually cuts short by 1.25 inches from the back of that chain. So I'm really only going to do this yellow line in terms of internal boring. Okay, so we go to Tool. Let's just choose my internal tool. This is my Tool 2. Green check mark. Again, check the mounting. The mounting is already correct. Levels, again, it's just the safety distance. Under technology, we're still doing a turning. So it's still the same parameters. The only difference here is that it's recognized the tool and the geometry as internal. So it automatically chose the internal for me. If we go to rough, all these parameters I've left the same. There's a 40,000 step down. There's how much material I'm leaving on the walls. Under semi-finish and finish, I'm just going to add a finishing tool path. Strategies, there's no grooves on this, so it really doesn't matter what I choose here. And there really are no edges either, no corners, so I don't have to do anything about break edges. So I'm just going to do save and calculate. And let's take a look at a simulation of that toolpath. Okay, so the tool just comes in and a finishing pass. Now, obviously, I probably would modify this slightly more so I don't get that kind of edge there, but the idea was that you can cut short of the geometry. So that is internal and external. I'm also going to cover the grooving toolpath in this same video simply because they're programmed almost the exact same way. So let's take a look at that as well. So add turning operation, grooving. Again, the workflow is the same. In this case, though, SolidCAM understands a groove as a U shape or a valley. So this groove is perfect. It actually comes and ends at the stock right there. So let's just do green check mark, tool. I'm going to choose a grooving tool. Okay, in this case, I'm just going to use a square grooving tool. Check the mounting. It is coming from the positive X direction. Levels are the same. Technology is the same. But again, this is a grooving operation, but it's going to be programmed the same way as the turning. You can see we have OD turning, ID turning, face, front, and back. Essentially, all you're doing here is using a grooving tool rather than just the regular turning tools that you saw previously. Rough, same sort of thing. In this case, though, because we're doing a groove, we have the option of either doing a constant with a step-down value over here, or you can just do single, which actually just wipes that out. I'm just going to do constant for now. So there's our constant. And here's our step over, 40 thou. And how we use that step over, we can actually tell it to do it in cutting order of rows or columns, and under direction, which direction we'd like to do those rows or columns. In this case, we have side to side, zigzag, middle to outside. You can stagger them whichever way you want. I'm just going to go side to side. Again, rough offset. We have our 20 thou and our 8 thou. Semi-finish, finish. I'll leave those as is. Everything here, again, is exactly the same as the turning. The only difference here is we have grooving parameters where, obviously, because we're moving in the radial direction, we might want to have certain considerations for the feeds and speeds as we move in the radial direction. And then, of course, we have the break edges again, the internal corners and whatnot. If I do a save and calculate on that, we'll see that the toolpath, again, working off the updated stock, it knew that the groove is only in there. Again, the chain showed it that, but it knows exactly that even though the chain came to this point, there's no material up there. And if we take a look at a turning simulation of that, there's my side to side, final finishing pass, and done. So OD turning, ID turning are done using the turning toolpath, and then grooving, you just choose your grooving tool, and you can do a grooving toolpath. If you have any further questions on the turning or the grooving toolpath, you can give us a call at 1-866-975-1115, extension 2, or you can stay tuned for the rest of the videos, of the turning videos. Thank you for watching.